Hey everybody, and welcome to Midwest Gaming Classic 2022.
Give yourselves a round of applause!
My name is Brad, and this is Hair the Dogcast. Joining me on stage, we have David Wise, the composer for so many wonderful games, the Donkey Kong Country series, Battletoads,
Diddy Kong Racing,
Starfox
Adventures, Snake Pass, worked on Yooka-Laylee, and lots of others, one or two.
An absolute legend. And we also have Kevin Bayliss.
Hello!
Worked for Rare, designed Diddy Kong, did the redesign for Donkey Kong, made so many wonderful games. What are some of your favorite highlights from your career?
Working on Killer Instinct and Diddy Kong Racing and Battletoads, and I think I really enjoyed working on Donkey Kong Country.
It's definitely one of my favorites. So welcome to Milwaukee. You guys just got in last night. What brings you to the convention? I know you wanted to talk about some new project that you guys are working on together.
Yeah, it's called Salamandos, and Kev's going to explain what that is.
Am I? Okay, so Salamandos is kind of a spiritual successor to the Battletoads characters that we developed way back in the 90s for the NES. And at the moment, it's not a video game, but we would very much like it to be a video game. But yes, it's basically an action story set in the 1980s. And it involves some amphibious acrobatic superheroes, which are reminiscent of some totally awesome characters which were developed for the NES way back in 1991, I think.
Yeah, it's a good year.
I checked out some of the designs earlier, and
featuring music
beautiful.
by David Wise, legendary video game composer of Donkey Kong Country and many, many, many more titles.
Yes.
And graphics by Kevin Bayliss.
Designer of many, 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 many characters that you're probably familiar with on some of the games that you're holding in your hands right now.
So I love that we went to Up Down, the arcade bar last night.
Yes.
And you finally arrive, and the first thing you do is Killer Instinct, and you run to your machine. You still fall in love every time you see it.
Every time, particularly the first game, because I think that was the magic for us that we'd first unleashed motion capture graphics combined with pre-rendered graphics, and the effect was awesome, and so we were blown away by ourselves, and so we're very excited about that coming out into the arcade.
So I was told by Tom last night, he said, we have to get Kevin on, and you have to have him tell the story about how he started working for Rare back in the day.
Oh, right. Okay, so, yeah, it was a long, long, long time ago. Some of you guys weren't even born back then, I guess. Probably most of you weren't born back then. It was picture 1987, and it's a winter's evening in the UK, and it's very wet and stinking cold, because this is what we have to put up with in the UK most of the time. And my parents, I'd actually been drawing graphics, and I'd finished working at school, and I'd sent a few pictures off to different companies. And I got this reply back from this guy called Tim Stamper. And I had no idea who this guy, Tim Stamper, was, but I knew that I'd applied for a position as an artist at this company called Rare Limited. And so I got this call from Tim and said, hey, would you like to come and take a look around the building? It was my Tim Stamper impression. That's pretty good, isn't it?
That's very good.
It's very good.
Yeah.
And so my parents,
Sorry,
they took me to the company. So Tim walked me around the place, and I had no idea who the company was. And then he just pulled out some big sheets from a kind of rack that he'd got in his graphics studio, and it was all of the original artwork for the video games that they produced years ago on the ZX Spectrum, which I think you've got it over here is the Timex. Is a squishy rubber keyboard machine that was probably not as popular in the US.
No.
It was invented by a guy called Sir Clive Sinclair, who actually passed away last year.
Yeah.
Very famous techno star, but technological genius who invented pretty much the home computer scene in the UK. And they were masters of the game, literally, with a company called Ultimate Play the Game. And I went to this company, I took a look around, and as soon as I realized who they were, they offered me a job to start the following week, and I kind of thought about everything and said, yeah, I'll take the job. And then shortly before I left, he showed me his Lamborghini in one of the barns that was outside, and I was sold at that point anyway, but I thought this is going to be the best place to work ever, and it was, and I worked there for 18 years.
So, David, how did you get into working with video game music? Was that's a field you wanted to get into, or?
No, not at all. It was all, I mean, I didn't even know what video games were. The closest I'd got to video games at that point was when my father brought home an Atari console, and it had ping pong on it.
Yeah.
That's what I knew about video games.
Terrible music in that game.
Well, yes. It's very
Good
pink.
sound effects, though, yeah.
So, I was working in a music shop. It was the 80s, and I was selling... I started selling drums, and then some guys from Yamaha came in. They had this computer called a Yamaha CSX or something like that. And they wanted some people to learn how to sell it. And I was upstairs on the drums. I wasn't really interested because my father was really big into computers, and, there was that kind of father-son thing where I wasn't really bothered. But the guys from Yamaha came in about 3 months later. We hadn't sold one, and the boss who was there said, "Look, if somebody learns how to use this, you can have an extra day off a week." So I was sold. So I took the unit home, learned how to program it, and I got it hooked up. It uses this thing called MIDI, which kind of goes into the back of the computer and goes into your keyboards, so it can play everything for you. So I'd set it up, and we were using Duran Duran songs and We Close Our Eyes kind of songs, and it
was the 80s.
It was the 80s, and they used to fly at the shop. I'd sell several of these a day. And, back then I was selling £10,000 worth of computers a day, which is crazy, really. And Tim and Chris had come in, and they wanted a demonstration, so I'd finished it, and I said, "I'm sorry, I haven't got any more songs you might recognise." I said, "I've just got a few of my own," so I very gingerly played these songs to them. And Chris turned around to Tim and he said, "Oh, monsters." And I was... So they said, "Oh, we've got an office." I thought, "Oh, I've sold another one." We went upstairs. They bought all of the equipment that I demonstrated to them and offered me a job. And that's how I got into video games.
What a job offer.
So how many of you were working at Rare around the time Donkey Kong Country was getting made? Pretty small, I imagine.
Quite a few of us by Donkey Kong Country time, wasn't it? There was around about 40 or so, and then we started really looking at
ramping it up. So, before the Donkey Kong Country, there was about 16 of us, and then we started really getting more staff on board to help with that.
How did the creative process with Nintendo start? To get the IP for Donkey Kong, that's a huge deal. Was there a bunch of suits that came in and said, "You can have the Kong"?
Pretty much, yes. We received a fax. In a nutshell, I was working on, I was experimenting with some graphics for using the silicon graphics machines that we've been given. We were just experimenting with all this new technology. And we needed something as a game, as a sort of a test. And so I'd started working on a fighting game. But we had a visit scheduled from Nintendo. Nintendo came along and they took a look at the fighting game, and to cut a long story short, after seeing it, decided that we were going to be making their next big project, and they invested fully in us and supplied us lots of new machines, and we got on down to business making monkeys.
Also, you have to remember at that point, everything up to that point had been 2D. So the fact that Kev had been working on these 3D rendered graphics, the difference was instead of seeing a character, suddenly on screen you've got a character. It looked as though you could put your hand in and take out this 3D character. It was that different. It was groundbreaking stuff, and
especially on the Super Nintendo.
Oh, absolutely. So once you saw that, it was pretty much deal done at that point.
Was there a lot of limitations on what you could do with Donkey Kong? Because you did the redesign. Did they say you can do this and not that, or did they turn any of your ideas down?
They gave me pretty much free run.
That's amazing.
I didn't really realize the power that I'd been given, and I think looking back now, because I was so young when I did that, I could probably have designed him in many different ways that I didn't even go down the routes of exploring. But I tried to keep the character relatively compact because I was still thinking along the lines of NES and the way that the drawbacks and technical limitations of the system worked. And so I wanted to make it work and work well with a platform game. But aesthetically, I think I could have designed it in many different ways, but we spent a fair amount of time going up with a few of us were actually coming up with ideas, but it was given to me to actually come up with a final design and then build something, and so we settled on the one that you see today, which is basically a Battletoad, and every time I ever draw eyes, I always draw these eyes that look like two bananas anyway, and that's basically any character I ever draw.
That's bananas.
They look like that. Fruit.
So, was Diddy Kong originally going to be Donkey Kong Jr. as a redesign?
Yeah, there was looking for another character, but I assumed it was going to be classed as Donkey Kong Jr., but they said they wanted a fresh new character for this, and so a new sidekick. I don't know whether they were just concerned about how much free reign they were giving us and whether or not they wanted to give us two characters. So we set about creating this whole new universe based on 3D graphics, and it was all sort of based on the style of this new render technology. I came up with the idea for Diddy Kong, and the one thing that they said they would like to have some kind of feature that he can do, which is imperative for the gameplay. And so we gave him the tail, made him a monkey rather than a chimpanzee, and so he became Diddy Kong, Donkey Kong's nephew.
Nephew, okay.
I think
the family tree is confusing to me. I've looked into it, and it's a deep, dark hole.
I think it changes every 10 years, or whoever's talking about them probably modifies that genetic pool a little bit.
David, with making the music for Donkey Kong Country, what was that process like? Was it you hidden in a cow shed for a couple weeks?
In fact, I was in that cow shed for a whole year or more.
It took about a year to do the whole soundtrack.
It did, yeah. Oh, yeah. It was. When you see us composing now, we've got computers which have masses of SSDs in there and tons of RAM, and we've got a keyboard, and it's comparatively easy. But back then, everything was typed in, so we'd have to transcribe it into code.
Oh, yeah.
And code the whole thing. And we had a fantastically small amount of memory. We had 64K, which is about 400 milliseconds at CD quality. So that is tiny. It's like somebody saying hello, but only getting as far as the first L. So it's that short amount of time. And it took a lot of technical stuff to try and get samples down and code it into binary and put in the memory so that it would be small enough. And that's where a lot of the work went, trying to compress everything into the actual memory that we had available. And it was all typed in. It takes a lot of time, but the reason we typed it in because it saved a lot of memory. So the more memory we had, the more sounds we could have.
Yeah.
So it was a year in the cowshed at Rare.
And did work on the second game happen right after you finished the first?
Yeah, absolutely. There was no time to wait. We just got straight on with it.
So after the Donkey Kong Country series, what were some of the next things you guys were working on?
Well, for myself, I stepped off Donkey Kong Country to continue working with Killer Instinct, and then we moved on to the N64 with the likes of Diddy Kong Racing and that kind of thing. But I was actually at the company till 2005, but up until then, I'd worked on various different games from different generations in the whole video game sort of family tree. So I think, for me, the most fun time was the N64 time, because in one game in particular I worked with David on, and that was Diddy Kong Racing, and it was just such a fun, colourful game to work on, and everybody loved the racing games, and so it was just taking it in that different direction and putting it in an adventure sort of scenario. It just made it so much more interesting than what we were used to.
And for me, I could use a keyboard when I was composing, so I was sussed. It was the future, so I really enjoyed that one.
So things came on quite a long way from 8-bit graphics to 16-bit graphics once we'd been given the power of the N64, and we could start using triangles to make our graphics with. But in some ways, we had to take a step back too, because we'd been used to rendering all of these characters with curves and super textures and giving them fur and skin-looking colors, so they look realistic, and shadows, and so everything looked really solid. But then when we moved on to the Nintendo 64, suddenly everything was a triangle with a flat color on it, or maybe a little bit of a texture, and so we had to rethink the way that you looked at the graphics, because you couldn't rely on the shadows and the solidity anymore. It was now all about immersing yourself in a 3D environment.
Oh, yeah. What are some of your favorite characters that you've designed in your career, Kevin?
I kind of like Timber, the tiger, who was originally the main character that was going to be in Starfox Adventures, and he got pushed aside and then replaced with Saberwolf, who was a nod to the early Ultimate Play the game Saberwolf for the ZX Spectrum. But then he got pushed aside because, of course, eventually we ended up with Fox McClure in the game as the protagonist. But I think my favorite characters, all of the Killer Instinct characters, because I very much enjoyed putting on a motion capture suit and acting out a lot of the moves in a sweaty motion capture DIY suit that we constructed ourselves at Rare. And just in general, every character I've enjoyed making, because when I see them at shows like this today and I see them still making people laugh and smile, I just think, they were all worth making. So
yeah, we were out at the bar, and I just look up and Donkey Kong's on Mario Kart 64. I'm like, you made that guy. You designed him. So what is the music creation process like for you, David? are you given like the levels? Do you see what you're going to be like a minecart, and you know you're going to work from there? Or do you just kind of have the music in your heart and you just do what you want?
I think for the racing game, I mean, fortunately we could play it, which is really important. It's very important to play games because you get an idea for the tempo and the feel and the speed of the game that you're going to work on. And then I really get to my end when I get to see all the graphics and the backgrounds, because that really dictates how that is going to look.
It inspires you, doesn't it?
Exactly. So if you can see something set, I don't know, in a desert, then suddenly you know what kind of instruments you're going to need for a desert level, or if it's in a fire level, you can start getting a bit creative. And for me, I use some Indian-inspired instruments for the lava levels. So it's a fun, creative time at that point.
It's so cool. Huge fan. What are some of your favorite compositions that you've made for games throughout your career?
I really enjoyed working on Starfox Adventures. So I was given free rein, and I could explore with orchestral things, which I really started with DKC2 when we were doing that one. I suppose, again, looking at DKC2, things like Aquatic Ambience and the Sticker Brush Symphony, they've stood the test of time, and quite a lot of people have done covers of those over the years.
Were you approached for Tropical Freeze, or did you say, I wouldn't mind coming back? Because that soundtrack is exemplary and just everything I love about video game music. It just sets the tone for the levels, and such variety in the styles of music.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I was in the process, or I think I'd just left Rare, and I'd had about a year off, and Nintendo got in touch, and they asked if I'd wanted to come back and work on Tropical Freeze.
Yeah.
And so it was over in Austin, which isn't too far away from here. When you look where we've come from, so in the UK. So it was like going back home. And there was Michael Kelbar there who'd been with us at Rare for the original one.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of I suppose history and So it's very familiar.
Thank you for Big Top Bop. Just wanted to say thank you for that one.
Okay.
Yeah, and so your new project, Salamandos. Can you tell us a little bit about it's not a video game yet. You want it to be a video game.
Yeah, we're kind of negotiating at the moment. We want to take it in the area of a video game, but the main purpose was we were doing shows like this over in Europe and places, and a lot of people were asking us to sign stuff, and then they wanted to buy stuff, but we couldn't actually sell them anything because it wasn't our IP to sell, so that was wrong. So I was talking to Kevin and said, we really need our own kind of concept that we can call our own, and then we can sell that freely, and people can support us doing it. And the idea really was to take the soundtracks that I was working on and make it into something more tangible. So this is where Kev came in, and we started making this digital comic that you can buy online over at salamandos.com.
I think... For me, I mean, I've been Dave's friend for a long time now. We've obviously 30 years or so known each other in the video game industry. But we always said we're missing a trick here, and we really do need to do something together. And we've done a lot of sort of live performances with covers bands and writing bits of music and stuff. So we like to perform. And when we get the chance to, and we did MagFest about 2 years ago before the whole lockdown. And we wanted to make sure that we'd got something that we could perform and enjoy and give everybody some kind of... it was like a celebration of our 60 years between us in the industry.
Exactly.
That sort of encompasses everything and brings a whole... what we're all about at Rare, the music and the graphics of that style.
Yeah, and also it draws on nostalgia, because when we started, it was mid-80s, wasn't it?
Yes.
And so this is where Salamandos comes in. It's like, I suppose, Spielberg-inspired films.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where it's going.
Because obviously there's a whole story, and we've got a soundtrack that we're working on with that. So I mean, I'd love it to be a musical stage production, Salamandos the show.
I volunteer to be one of the characters if you need someone.
Well, we've got your numbers, so
yeah.
But I just want to be on stage singing Salamandos songs dressed as a huge salamander. And so hopefully it'll be a lot more than just a visual show on a stage. It'll be a video game, a movie, a cartoon, and everything. But we're working with the right people anyway every day, because I still work at Platonic Games.
Yeah.
We produce Yooka-Laylee and Impossible Lair, and we've also we've become a publisher now, and so we've got several other games that you can also buy from Steam. If you check out Platonic Games, you can see all the titles that we've produced. But we're working with this network of people all the time, so who knows what's going to happen with it. So.
So next year, we're going to have the musical and the very important gamer after party.
Yes.
That sounds great. Absolutely.
I'll bring a salamander costume and we'll just wing it.
And Steven Spielberg will probably be here too then, talking about the whole the movie concept.
So, and also, I think there'll be lots of opportunities for cosplay for that one as well.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
We'll be giving prizes for costumes, definitely.
Yes, absolutely. I've already sorted mine out. It's a bit risque, but, you know.
So you guys have a booth in the vendor hall. Are you selling some items?
We do, yeah. We're selling signed T-shirts, signed posters. We've got some of the original concept art posters that we produced when we first put the idea into play. And we've also got a lot of small postcards and larger posters that we can sign. We've even got some original music scores that Dave wrote. We've printed some of those out for you, and we'll sign those and write messages on for you. And also, if you want to bring your copies of your retro games, anything that we've worked on, we'll be happily sign those for you.
Well, thank you two so much for joining us today, and more importantly, for creating so many wonderful gaming memories.
Thank you so much for asking us on your podcast. It's amazing.
Absolutely.
And these guys were so hospitable to us last night, and they gave us plenty of beer. So check out the Raw Dogs podcast whenever you get a chance, because I'm certainly going to be subscribing to it now.
Yeah. I as soon as you guys walked in, I just came and said hi, and you're like, hello, hello. I'm like, you guys want beer? They're like, we will follow you anywhere.
Exactly. It had been a long day. We'd started off at Manchester Airport in the biggest security queue.
Unbelievable.
It was over 3 hours. In fact, it made the news yesterday in the UK.
Oh,
It was on
wow.
the front page of one of our daily papers. So, so we spent 3 hours in security. It'd been a whole long day, so by the time we got the beer, thanks to these guys, it was very much appreciated. Thank you.
So everybody, come say hi to these two. They're the most wonderful people, very gracious. And thanks again.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us. Have a good day, everybody. Bye-bye.